Heat rose from the dunes in veils that made the horizon shimmer like molten glass. By daylight, the desert of Sabir seemed empty, a place where camel bones were bleached into chalky confessions, and the wind carved sighing corridors through towers of sand. Yet when night slid across the land, another landscape emerged, constellations as sharp as flint, strewn so thickly that even the dark between them glowed. Sadiq ibn Rahman, caravan guide, had spent half his life steering merchants across this furnace, trusting the stars far more than the wavering dunes beneath his boots. He thought he knew the desert's every secret until the day the palace summoned him to escort a woman who charted heavens instead of horizons. A woman whose silk-soft hands had never gripped a camel's reins. Lale Khorasani arrived at the caravanserai, wrapped in robes the color of twilight. She carried ink-stained scrolls, brass calipers, and an astrolabe so intricately etched it could have been forged from a moth's wings. Sadiq watched her measure the sun's altitude, while scribes scurried to collect her observations. She moved with self-assurance that belied her delicate frame, and her voice, when she greeted him, contained the calm of moonlit water. "Master Guide," she said, inclining her head, "His Majesty requests a map of the hidden oases that once stitched our kingdom together. I can find them in the sky. You can find them in the sand. Together, perhaps, we may give the desert back its wells." Sadiq raised an eyebrow. Oases are not shy maidens waiting to be courted by chart and compass. Many vanished beneath dunes generations ago. "Or so men insist," Lila replied. She tapped her astrolabe. "But the old chronicles speak of water mirrored by particular stars. If we align that record with the current heavens, we may reveal paths forgotten by time." A fortnight later, they left the capital under the low hum of anticipation. Their caravan was small: 6 camels, 2 water carriers, 1 cook who doubled as a tent master, and a taciturn guard named Baram who sharpened his scimitar whenever conversation grew too lively. Lala was given a palanquin shaded by indigo curtains, but she rejected it, choosing instead to ride astride like a Bedouin youth. The servants exchanged incredulous glances. Sadiq merely nodded approval. As they wound beyond the last line of date palms, palace walls shrank behind them, and the desert, vast as prophecy, opened ahead. The first night they camped on a plateau of hard-packed earth, where the wind had swept the sand away, revealing a mosaic of black volcanic stone. Lala set her instruments upon a low table. She trimmed a candle to a stub so its flame would not outshine the faintest star. Sadiq brewed kahwa thick enough to stain the tongue. They worked shoulder to shoulder. She cited Aldebaran and Al-Nitak, calling out angles. He marked bearings in the dust, translating celestial geometry into ground truth headings. Between calculations, they traded tales. Lala spoke of the Royal Observatory's spiraling tower, where lenses ground from quartz could resolve moons no broader than a lentil. She recalled the hush of students when a comet appeared, how the king himself climbed the stairs, robe trailing to gaze upon that icy wanderer. Sadiq countered with stories of mirages so perfect that thirsty men offered greetings to their own reflections, and of a sand viper whose bite allegedly froze blood into ruby crystals. Lila laughed, the sound like distant bells, but she never dismissed his lore. Instead, she teased patterns from it, suggesting how certain minerals might cause ruby-red coagulation, or how thermal layers sculpted shimmering lakes. In turn, Sadiq found logic in her stargazing, discovering that myths pinned to constellations formed mnemonic chains, roots in ink and firelight. On their 4th night, They reached the White Barrens, a swath of alabaster dunes, soft as sifted flour. Here, the air tasted of gypsum, and footfalls crunched as though stepping on frost. Layla paused often, sketching the dunes' steep angles. "See that one?" she whispered. "Its ridge aligns precisely with Orion's belt tonight. The old chart says a spring nestled below such a dune, if it stands between Al-Nilam and Saif on the third moon of summer." Sadiq frowned. "Those dunes wander. Last season, a sirocco marched them 15 leagues. Yet some formations reoccur," Lala insisted, "like chords in music." Her finger traced a line from star to dune to horizon. Sadiq recognized the conviction in her eyes. It mirrored the certainty he himself felt when the North Star guided him home. He signaled the camel drivers to make camp. At dawn, they would dig. Morning sun spilled gold over white sand, dazzling as a smithy's furnace. Their shovels bit shallow at first, producing only dry crystals that smoked in the light. "A fool's errand," Borum grunted, but Sadiq noted a coolness underfoot, a damp breath. "Deeper," he urged. Soon the shovel blades struck hardpan, and a vapor of moisture puffed up. They widened the pit. Brown earth emerged, then mud. The cook whooped. A trickle seeped into the depression, clear as blown glass. By midday, they had coaxed a pool large enough for the camels to kneel and drink. Lala lowered a jar, lifted it brimming, and offered the first sip to Sadiq. As liquid coated his throat, Sadiq realized he was swallowing Starlight-made water. "Your sky spoke true," he said. "Our sky," she corrected, tugging at her veil to mop her brow. Her hair, dark as raven wings, escaped in a damp curl. That evening, lanterns ringed the newborn oasis. The desert smelled of wet stone and jasmine, for Lala had crumbled dried petals into the water as a blessing. Sadiq sat beside her on a dune's gentle shoulder. "How did you begin reading the heavens?" he asked. She smiled, gaze drifting upward. "When I was 5, my mother died of coughing sickness. My father, chief scribe, could not comfort me with words, so he carried me to the observatory roof. He pointed at a faint shimmer, my first view of the Milky Way. 'That,' he said, 'is the dust of all journeys. When souls depart, they blaze a trail there, so others may follow.' I watched until dawn erased the sky. From that moment, every star became a story I might one day translate." Sadiq nodded. "My father was a guide. He taught me lines in the sand, not the sky. He said dunes are books whose pages turn with each wind. You must read quickly before they change. Night travel was forbidden for me until I proved I could track by smell, by echo, by the way heat clings to a stone long after sunset. When he died beneath a collapsing ridge, I finished the route alone, leading 30 merchants to safety. Since then, the desert and I keep each other's secrets." Lila studied him as though mapping constellations across his face. "You and I read different languages," she said softly, "yet somewhere they rhyme." Their expedition pressed on. Each dusk, Lala identified stellar conjunctions. Each dawn, Sadiq traced dune morphology and mineral hues. They plotted 5 oases in 3 weeks, some reduced to pockets of damp clay, others sprawling enough to host date groves if colonists returned. At every find, Sadiq hammered an iron stake, topped with a bronze mirror, so distant travelers might catch sunlight glinting and know salvation lay near. But the desert does not grant gifts untested. On the 26th night, clouds muscled across the sky, monstrous and black, blotting stars from horizon to zenith. Wind roared like a lion, denied its kill. Sand rose in curtains so dense that camels coughed, kneeling and folding their legs tight. Sadiq roped the caravan together, shouting orders swallowed by the gale. Layla clutched her scroll case. Years of observations rolled inside, and followed the line by touch. They huddled in a shallow wadi, its walls trembling under the storm's assault. Sand accumulated as swiftly as snowfall, burying camel flanks. Lala's face, normally composed, tightened with fear. "Without stars, we are blind," she cried. "Then we listen," Sadiq said over the howl. He closed his eyes, tilted his head. The wind's pitch shifted across the wadi, revealing hollows and rises. "There's a break eastward, behind that ridge. The storm slides around it like water around a rock. If we reach its lee, we may survive." Bahram protested, citing risk to the animals. The cook muttered prayers, but Lala touched Sadiq's elbow, trust shining. "Lead," she said. They moved, bodies doubled, Lale matching Sadiq step for step. Grains scoured their skin raw. Minutes stretched elastic. Suddenly the wind slackened, replaced by muffled hush. They had entered the storm's hollow eye. Sadiq ordered pits dug. Camels were laid inside, blankets over their mouths. Through the night they waited. Layla recited star names under her breath like protective charms. When dawn finally pierced the gloom, the storm had passed, leaving a sculpted landscape no one had seen before. Ridges now rose where flats had been, and flats where ridges once towered. The caravan's course, painstakingly recorded, seemed erased. Lala clutched her scrolls. "Our bearings are meaningless." "Not entirely," Sadiq said, pointing. A single cloud remained, thin as gauze, directly above a newly formed crest. Storm clouds often linger over moisture. "Let us look." They ascended, sand slipping like ball bearings beneath their boots. At the summit, heat shimmered across a shallow basin. Yet, at its center, a dark patch hinted at vegetation. They descended and found a copse of thorny shrubs cupping a spring no wider than a shield, cold enough to numb fingers. Layla shook her head in wonder. The storm did not bury the oasis, it uncovered it. Sadiq knelt, pressing his palm to damp earth. "Might be the very well the king's great-grandfather lost during the War of Embers. Soldiers burned groves to deny water to their enemies. See the charcoal in the soil?" Lala scraped a sample into a vial. "We should mark this before the dunes wander again." She produced a silver stylus and wrote coordinates on a parchment. Then she leaned forward, drawing a tiny star beside the notation. "For luck," she said. That night, the sky returned more brilliant than before, as though the storm had scoured even the heavens. Lala spread a fresh chart and began recalibrating positions. Sadiq watched, admiration warming him, until Bahram coughed meaningfully. "There's talk," the guard said. "In the capital, certain lords fear your discoveries. Oases once lost granted them power. Caravans needed their way stations. If we restore these wells, tariffs vanish." Sadiq considered. "Sabir thrives if all can travel and trade." "Let the lords bristle. Lords own blades as sharp as mine," Bahram warned. Before dawn, Sadiq found Layla still awake, lantern haloing her tired eyes. He relayed Bahram's concerns. She rolled a parchment, tying it with crimson cord. "This map holds the first 3 oases. Take it. If harm befalls us, at least part of our work survives." He accepted the scroll, sliding it into a waterproof tube hidden in his saddlebags. "I'd rather safeguard you." She smiled sadly. "Stars show possibilities, not certainties. Promise me only that our map will reach those who need it." "I promise." They journeyed another month, weaving across salt flats that glittered like dragon scales, through basalt mazes where echoes folded upon themselves. At last, the final oasis awaited, a legendary lake called Zahir's Mirror, rumored to hold fish with scales of gold. No chart confirmed its location. Only stray verses in a minstrel's ballad placed it where Scorpio's tail drips fire upon the earth. On the night Scorpio climbed the southern sky, Lele set up her astrolabe on a ridge aglow with bioluminescent beetles. She plotted the arc of Antares, brilliant and red, and drew lines converging on a valley shaped like a crescent. Sadiq surveyed the ground and discovered a faint trail, half-covered but unmistakable. Camel prints, older than memory, pointing the same direction. "We follow at dawn," he said. The valley was guarded by sandstone pillars carved by time into columns of sleeping giants. Between them lay cracked earth, but Sadiq sensed hidden promise. He knelt, sifted dust through his fingers. A puff of humid breath escaped. "Water lies close." They dug where a fallen pillar cast permanent shade. By mid-afternoon, a geyser erupted, spraying cool mist into scorching air. Wind carried droplets into sunbeams, painting temporary rainbows. Within hours, a shallow lake formed, reflecting the sky so perfectly that when Sadiq gazed upon it, he felt he walked upon the heavens themselves. Tiny silver fish, dormant eggs waiting decades, hatched and darted like shooting stars. Lala laughed, her face radiant. "Zahir's mirror," she whispered. They lingered 2 days, repairing leather skins and letting camels fatten on fresh reeds. At night, Lala and Sadiq lay side by side on a carpet, charts spread between them, comparing celestial lattices with terrestrial veins. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. The silence between them felt full as the desert moon. On the final morning, Lala pressed her palm against Sadiq's chest. "In the observatory, we name stars for heroes, kings, lovers, but new stars are rare. Would you let me name one?" Sadiq's throat tightened. "Only if I may name an oasis." She nodded. On a blank section of her chart, she drew a tiny bright point just off the ecliptic and inscribed, "Sadiq's heart." He, in turn, etched Layla's oasis beside the newly formed lake. Their ink, fragile though it was, felt like stone scrawled onto time. The journey home unfurled like a mellow desert breeze. They retraced stakes, glinting in sun, proving routes solid. Caravans glimpsed the mirrors and hailed them, following tracks to water. News outran them, rumors of springs reborn, of a star-reading woman and a sand-whispering man who stitched sky to earth. Outside the capital, officials in lacquered armor awaited, some cheering, others grim-faced. The vizier bowed, accepting scrolls bound in goat hide. Courtiers studied signatures of oases, voices swelling with astonishment or outrage. A handful muttered about lost monopolies. Others praised divine providence. The king himself emerged, beard braided with silver. "You have redrawn my kingdom," he declared. "Ask your reward." Sadiq glanced at Lala. She spoke first, voice steady. "Grant safe passage to all who travel these routes. No tax upon water." The king lifted a brow, but nodded. "So be it," Sadiq added, "and repair the ancient wells. Post star charts at each caravanserai, so every guide may read them." Again, the king agreed. Then he leaned closer. "And you two? What do you desire?" The astronomer and the guide exchanged a look reflecting moons and dunes. "Time," Layla said finally, "to finish mapping the borderlands where the sky runs out of names." "Permission granted?" the king laughed, gesturing flamboyantly. "Though I doubt the sky will ever deny you." That night, feasts roared in marble halls, but Sadiq and Lale slipped away to the observatory's roof. They spread a rug, poured coffee from a copper dalla, and studied the city lights below, twinkling like domesticated stars. The desert was a dark silhouette at the horizon, uncluttered, inviting. "Will you return to the caravans?" Lala asked. "Only with an astronomer at my side," he replied. She reached for his hand, threading fingers calloused from ropes with those stained by ink. Above them, the heavens churned in silent harmony. Below, wells they had awakened cooled the parched throats of strangers. Between those realms stood two people whose stories had become a bridge of sand and sky. Wind brushed their cheeks, warm yet carrying hints of distant rain. A promise of change, perhaps, or merely the desert's eternal sigh. Either way, they were ready. Together they faced the constellations they now partially owned, each sparkling point a waypoint, each mapped oasis a heartbeat beneath, and in that shimmering dialogue between Earth and cosmos, they read their next journey beginning to glow